Belgrade. Future scenarios.
Hi. Oh. Hello, everybody. Nice to be here. I want to thank the sponsors and my family. My name is Vuk. And I'm an archaeologist. Don't do that. So, we have to all go down from the stage now and come back again and do it right. So, my name is Vuk, and I'm an archaeologist, which is more than enough qualifications for me to try and moderate these four crazy guys. I tried to talk to the organizers, but I couldn't get anything out of them. So I'm supposing the following few things. The first thing is that they've put these four guys together on a panel because they're all using the word future on their business cards. And it's a good enough reason. I'm totally there. I can see that they're very different people. They're doing different things. So we're going to try and see what unites them, what makes them interesting as a bunch. That's my goal for here. And so, as a little bit of a frame, we made a little discussion before. We decided to talk of ways we think, or these guys think, and build their own scenarios in their heads, and then try to follow those scenarios, or discuss those scenarios, or make them a business model, if I'm not too blunt right now. You happen to be running a business, right? Okay, nah. So, I don't have any set of questions for you, very seriously thinking, but I believe it's okay if we just follow some order like this way. Yeah, I'm sorry you sat here. And if you would be so kind to, riff a little bit on how do you create your scenario, your claim about the future that then you're describing to everybody else.
Persistence.
Just a second, we need to set. There's a green light, it should work. Try again.
It's persistence?
No, it's not. Let's see. Well, this is a present, so yeah, looks cool.
Okay, it's persistence.
It's persistence, it's being intensely stubborn. It's loving future scenarios and stories and narratives that take me away from the extremely boring part of life. Let me correct you, I don't make a business out of it yet. I would love to, but I am allergic to business and organizing myself in that manner. I just do my own thing, and it seems to work of late. I've done this since the 1980s in some format with a bunch of friends. It was this nice, hobby-like collaboration, and it started to pan out in the early 90s for the first time that I actually made, what you call predictions. Probably no one will remember them, but it was very much resource depletion oriented. And after years, I wondered, why did I get something right? And the idea is it's passion, and at some point, actually finding people that correct you. First, you start out finding people that correct you, and then you respect them for it. And then you find out, you seek out the people that you respect, and they turn out to be the right people that actually correct you and constantly fine-tune your analysis of the world.
All right. You guys are both Dutch, right?
Yeah.
And you both chose the sofa. I will think about that. But tell me.
Well, I think I was very lucky because I was talking to people in my head long before we had an internet. And now I can mail them. So that's basically it. It's sort of, I got more accuracy because of the net, but it's still a big mystery. It's poetry to me. So I went to study literature because I wanted to study the most inefficient sort of thing that I could sort of find. I thought literature would do. Now I'm stakeholder coordinator of YOTA, and talking to Siemens and SAP and sort of NXP in terms of all this Internet of Things, and I'll get to there sort of how I got there. But I think it's just one big thread that I've been sort of tapping in, being maybe a bit manic and sort of being a bit sort of being a bit boundaryless in a lot of things. So self-discipline is a very strong sort of factor in actually getting things done and sort of making things work. But I think this is basically why we're here, and sort of we seem to tap into, this flow, and then I don't know how you want to call it or how you're going to call it. But I think the flow is telling us to actually do something with it now, to sort of break it down into more concrete, intelligible sort of units. And that's what I've been trying to do with, from the moment in 2005 or 6 when we saw that open hardware would be a possibility. We founded Bricolabs, bricolabs.net, which is was co-founded by 4 people. Matt Ratto, Brona Farron, me, and Philip Fonseca, and Jaromil, 5 people. And that sort of, I think, is a kind of environment that keeps us all very sane. So we can be our own sort of crazy selves there. But it's not enough to talk sort of like amongst yourselves. So 3 years later, in 2009, I set up a council, basically with the idea that the Internet of Things was going to be the winning term, not ambient intelligence or pervasive computing or ubiquitous computing, and that it was important to sort of grab everybody who would Google Internet of Things in 2012, that they would find the Internet of Things Council, which was a word that Christian Nold, who does biomapping, coined up, so that we would be the council. We'd have this sort of authoritative tone. And that sort of seemed to work. So now I'm getting mails at info@internet.of things, from companies and from institutions and from actually quite large organizations who want to revamp their entire structure because they've seen the light of this sort of connectedness. And for that, we're going to set up a consultancy, which is going to launch in May, which is going to be called the Internet of People.eu. And that's going to be a regular consultancy. Yes, we're going to grab it all. Then six months later, I think we're going to launch the Internet of Creatures.eu to sort of get all the people away from this singularity scam. .eu.
EU. Not AU,
So, and that's
not
sort of
gold.
that's sort of the. And then I think in 10 years we can sort of push it all back to Bricolabs. So we can push it all back. So if we keep on track, then within 10 years we will be able to do the entire hack.
All right, somebody just noticed that the future is all old white guys. We have to respond to that somehow.
Right, yes. I'm not really a fan of scenarios, to be honest. Of course, the reason I work to try to defeat aging is because of the future rather likely scenario that if no one actually gets on with it, I will get sick when I get old, which is a shame, and probably die as well. But really, that's a present scenario as well. People are getting sick and dying of aging right now. So it's not really any speculation. I find actually that speculation is more of a problem than a positive in my field because, I'll raise the temperature of this a little bit, because science fiction writers keep coming up with random, arbitrary, dystopic features of their storyline that make the defeat of aging seem like a terribly bad idea.
Shifting away from
Which caused me no end of trouble, because I keep having to tell people why, Logan's Run isn't actually the way that we're going to deal with the problem of overpopulation or whatever. As some of you who saw my talk this morning this afternoon will remember, I actually feel that the uncertainty that we have, the lack of any justification for any particular scenario for the distant future in terms of how we will handle this or that situation, is actually all we need to be focusing on in order to justify hastening as much as we can the defeat of aging. But at the moment, what tends to happen is that people will come up with some potential problem and they'll immediately forget that we've got a problem today of 100,000 people every day dying of this horrible thing. So yeah, I'm a sort of anti-scenariosis type.
Well, I am a science fiction writer and quite a big fan of scenarios too. And what I learned about futurism, I learned from professional futurists. And I was hanging out with them because they were like good material for a science fiction writer. They're like very in touch and have a lot of things to offer us. So, you know, I got to meet a lot of guys who were strategic analysts and technical forecasters and historians and government planners and also guys who do scenarios. And I've been involved in doing a lot of scenarios, and they're really quite interesting kinds of structured encounters between people, which I think can have really useful kinds of psychological effects. But my feeling was that, you know, once you learn the basics of sort of how to spot trends and what other forecasters thought were cool instead of what the official future was and how to think about it, you know, fruitfully, you had to find aspects of it that you really wanted to know about. I mean, because if some aspect of the future bores you or repels you, you're really not going to have enough joy to really get good at it. So I ended up, I mean, lately, you know, there's not just one future any more than there's just one history. There's a lot of things going on, and there are certain kinds of trends that I'm like very interested in just because I'm so engaged with them that I can like study them over a long time. And if you went onto my blog where I sort of accumulate notes for fiction or articles I'm writing, you would see that I'm very into internet art, and that's like why I know who Vuk Chosic is. I'm into ubiquitous computing. For like 20 years I've been interested in it. Speculative design, speculative architecture, weird forms of media, dead media, extinct media, FX, motion graphics, augmented reality. They're not all the same thing, but they are things that like capture my interest. And they're not the most important things in the world. They're very important things to the people in this room, which is sort of why I'm in this room, but they're not all of history, okay? And they're not the broad screen future. That's a different matter. And the things that are interesting are not necessarily the important things. And that's the discipline of real futurism.
All right, so I guess you guys are different people. We're all approaching 50 from different sides, though. And we have one, yeah, come on. You think, except for knowing everything about the future, we happen to cover a certain sizable portion of the past as well. And I remember when I was studying this archaeology thing, we were quite happy with paradoxes, and one of the key phrases we used a lot was the unpredictability of the past, how you cannot exactly say why things happen even though they did happen in sequence, and this inability to describe causes then prevents you from claiming anything clever about the effects. Well, all right, but now, us as historic people with historic memory, and with also historic memory of predictions we were making 20 and more years ago, we have noticed something funky. Remember, we're in 2012 right now. We are supposed to go to work with space shuttles like Jetsons, right? We were supposed to, we're in that future that we read all about in our kids' magazines 40 and more years ago. And obviously there's a little bit of a discrepancy. Yesterday there was a panel, I failed to see it, sorry, about law and about what are the real problems of today's internet war that's going on between authoritarians and less authoritarians, or slow authoritarians, whatever you want to call them. There you go, I knew somebody would pick this up. Works, right? But very funny. Yeah. The thing I'm driving towards is the question that Bruce raised, was it you, outside, that somebody asked you, if, even though the four futurist revolutions that are being proposed are different, if we agree we all have some revolutions in our minds, what are your predicted enemies? The enemy of evolution, the counter-evolutionary force that you guys will be fighting, you expect to fight along the way of your own activist struggles. Is it a fair enough question? Would you like to react on that? Like, who's killing you? Who's preventing you to grow?
Me, personally?
Your scenario,
or the scenario
your
worldwide?
expectation of the future developments that you're trying to make happen.
I am a spectator. First and foremost, I'm a spectator. I have my own private life, which is not that particularly eventful at large. I'm not like Bruce Sterling, whose novels I read, or whose fiction I read in the 1980s, I was mesmerized by. So I don't make a career out of it yet. I'm open for proposals anyway, but it's not something I seek out actively. I just blog and I write articles and I try to call what I see as much as possible. But if you look at the world as such as it is right now, and you look at the dangers of the world which concern me right now, it's consistent throughout the whole of history. And it is like, as soon as people have a position in life where they have privilege, they will try to keep it as much as possible like it is. So society where there are elites or groups retaining money or power or energy resources or whatever kind of, they sit on the wealth. If it is a Louis, the Sun King in France, he just doesn't want things changed. So all progress was in fact made by revolution. Most progress we see in the history is actually a violent struggle between people who don't want to accept it anymore. So what I'm most concerned about at this stage, while I'm not against rich people, I got some very good friends who are very rich, but on the other hand, I am really concerned about decentralization. Take, for instance, Goldman Sachs. That's, I think, right now, at this point, the enemy of humanity.
Okay.
Well, so when in 2000 I went to this conference in Jönköping in Sweden on intelligent information interfaces, and in the morning I was still sort of running, so I run across a lake, and it was morning, it was misty, and I sort of saw King Arthur's sword sort of rising across the lake, and then I went into this conference, and then somebody stood up. It was completely packed like now, and there was somebody, actually he was down, he was sort of speaking, and he said, well, in 10 years from now, you will have a Bluetooth ring. You will point your ring at a tree as you walk in the woods, and a screen will pop up and tell you more about that tree. And I was sort of reaching for my gun, but I didn't have it with me at that time, because I thought, well, I've got to shoot this guy now, because, and this was sort of, there was like hundreds of Europe's brightest security programmers sort of there. It was the Intelligent Information Interface. It was FP6 or something. I could not believe that these people with sort of no sort of fantasy at all would actually think that you would need a screen to sort of, I'm not going to hug a tree, but sort of, I don't need RFID to mediate between me and the tree, please. And so I thought, these are very dangerous people, and I got to stay very close. Because, yeah, because we have this sort of open space in the woods, sort of this Heideggerian sort of space where becoming is still possible. And I think some people here, we also sometimes feel that sort of we cannot breathe anymore. Something like, sort of, I talk to people, young people, they don't want to make anything anymore, right? They don't want to put something into this world, because why would you want to put something into this world if it's just going to be another app and somebody's going to make 3 apps of it anyway, sort of. So, and this I feel very sad. So I think if the notion of becoming itself, sort of our notion of life itself, is becoming is this open space is filled up with clutter, and it's filled up with clutter at the moment. It's sort of it's like we cannot breathe. So the only enemy that I have at this moment is me, sort of, because I know if I stay on course, we all can be sort of the next sort of, we will be sort of the next wave of open source hardware, software. We will sort of win this sort of thing. It's inevitable. The fact is, do we want to win it? That's all. Can we actually forestall closure? Can we sort of not want to see the feedback immediately? Sort of, that's the thing, I think.
Fair enough, fair enough. I can see what you mean, I guess.
So, who are the enemies of my mission, of the mission to defeat aging? I think one could almost say that it's easier to ask the question, who are not the enemies? Because the fact is, the main enemy is the enormous preponderance in society worldwide of a tendency to make one's peace with aging, which was, of course, a very rational, justifiable attitude to take until quite recently. If there's this terrible, ghastly thing that's going to happen to you, and it's going to happen in the relatively distant future for most of us, and it's nothing, and there's absolutely nothing that we have any chance of doing about it, then you've got to find some way to put it out of your minds and get on with your miserably short lives, rather than being preoccupied by it.
When I was sort of, because I really have a problem with this, because I like dying in that sense. Sort of,
Hey,
I
Rob,
really think
speak to the
that
machine.
really,
Rob,
I think
talk to
it
the
has
machine.
to sort of.
Talk to the object. Just use it.
No, but I think it's a good thing, very good thing. And it's also this, we have to go one particular point and things have to sort of end and all that. It's not, sort of, when I was sort of younger, I was always wondering about the guys sitting in the villages on the benches for days, right? Every day they sit on the benches and look at the cars. And I would think, wow, I would really, really sort of...
It's a free world. Okay. Be my guest.
So I would sort of like to sit there, and sometimes I'm getting there even now, where I think I could just sit there and sort of fade, and to think that I have to play tennis and football and sort of jump off
mitochondria
boats
stimulators,
and believe that that's
man.
fun is really sort of...
Clean out the extracellular junk. That'll put some spring
First
in
of
your
all, I would
step.
remind you that the whole point of the therapies that we're going to have to defeat aging will be to ensure that you don't have to do all this lifestyle stuff in order to stay young. But, of course, yes, most people, being inadequately educated, haven't got the faintest idea how to spend a currently normal lifetime. Educated people, on the other hand, have no chance of being the sort of person that you were describing because they always have a backlog of things they haven't done. I have at least 1,000 years of backlog already, and I'm quite sure that by the time I'm through it, I'll have another 10,000. So there's no real problem there. No, but what I was saying, it makes sense to make your peace with aging, however irrational your rationalizations need to be, so long as it's actually true that there's nothing we can do about it. So it's only now, where we actually are within striking distance of genuinely bringing aging under medical control, that this has become such an enormous part of the problem. And, that's why I spend such an enormous amount of my time in outreach and education, softening up the public, basically, getting them to grow up and understand that these things are no longer so inevitable as they seemed, and therefore that we have a very good reason to actually do what we can to hasten the development of these things. So I would say the enemy is the past, the fact that since the dawn of civilization we haven't been able to do anything about aging, we've been terrified of it, we've been so terrified of it that the only defense was to pretend that we weren't terrified of it at all and to come up with ideas like, we've got to move